We have been preaching through the book of Judges. And 2 weeks ago, Mickey preached last week. 2 weeks ago, we started a series on Samson. There's quite a few chapters on Samson, the most of all of the judges in the book of Judges. And today we're going to look at Samson's marriage, Judges chapter 14. I want to read for you the end of the chapter 13 about his miraculous birth. It says here at the end of chapter 13, verse 25, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him in, and then it gives the name of a place, Mahana Dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. So as he grew up, the Spirit of the Lord was with Samson, which we're going to see. He was a guy who had a lot of talking about worldliness. He had a lot of worldliness in his life. And you'll see that in the next few weeks. Samson's marriage, Judges 14. I got a couple cartoons for my humor today. Here's the first one. I think, so Delilah cuts off Samson's hair. Get it? It's a hare, a rabbit, a hare. And she says, I think you've had enough. So she cut off Samson's hair. Here's another one. Here's another one about Samson's hair. Check it out, Delilah. I'm going dressed up as a weak man. See, he doesn't have his hair. He's got a bald wig on. All right. I thought those were fun. Here's my outline for our text today. First of all, verses 1, 2, and 3, we're going to look at how Samson wanted a Philistine wife. Verse 4 is the key to the entire chapter. The Lord was going to use this whole situation to punish the Philistines, to eventually redeem the Israelites from the Philistine captivity. We got a story as Samson was visiting his wife. He kills a lion. Samson proposes a riddle, and the Philistines cheat. They plowed with his heifer. That's the line that Samson uses. We'll talk about that. They cheated. So Samson gets revenge. And then at the end it talks about what happened to Samson's wife. And that will lead into next week's chapter 15. The story about Samson and his wife continues on. Okay, so Samson wants a Philistine wife. He's growing up. Probably an older teenager here, maybe in his young 20s. He had a miraculous birth. The angel of the Lord had come to his parents, and she conceived, and he grew in the Spirit of the Lord, began to stir him. But notice what Samson says here. Samson went down to Timnah, and at Timnah he saw one of the daughters of the Philistines. Then he came up and told his father, and mother, I saw one of the daughters of the Philistines at Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Doesn't it sound like a teenager talking to his parents, you know? But his father and mother said to him, is there not a woman among the daughters of your relatives or among all our people, the Israelites, that you must go and take a wife from the uncircumcised Philistines? But Samson said to his father, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. Okay, so we see a little bit into Samson's character here, huh? Demanding young man growing up, and he says to his parents, he didn't, Dad and Mom, I saw this pretty girl and I'd like it maybe if you would try it, but if you don't think I ought to marry a Philistine, that's all right. Yeah, that wasn't Samson's demeanor in these verses. Okay, some comments. We get a look at the character of Samson. He had had a special birth prophesied by the Lord, but now, I said, like a rebellious teenager or a spoiled child, he tells his parents what to do. You guys go down and get me that Philistine woman for my wife. And like the strong disciplinary parents they were, they said, "Oh, Samson, don't you think you ought to try an Israelite lady?" "No, get me her for my wife." You know, you could just see the conversation. The Lord had told them not to intermarry with the non-Israelites. As we go through here, it seems that Samson had more friends among the Philistines than he did among the Israelites. And he was affected. He was influenced by them. But Samson does not care. He wants the Philistine for his wife. By the way, if I were to ask most people, "Do you know the name of Samson's wife?" everyone would say, "Oh, that was Delilah." No, this lady is never named. He never did. She later gets killed by the Philistines. And he never did marry Delilah. He just lived with her. He loved her and lived with her, and they never did get married. So this is not Delilah, the one who cut off his hair. This is his, I was going to say his first wife, but his only wife that he had, not named in our text. All right, here's a cross-reference. Ephesians 6, 1, 2, and 3. "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother," which is the first commandment with a promise, "so that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth." Samson doesn't seem to... he hadn't read the book of Ephesians in quite a while, and he doesn't seem to have that. He was very demanding of his parents and wanted to get something that was not going to be good for him. All right, my point number 2, the Lord's real plan. All of a sudden in verse 4, as we go through here, you see Samson making these horrible choices. We see Samson in rebellious against his parents and making bad choices, being influenced by the Philistines. But the Lord was working even with Samson's bad choices. Notice verse 4. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines, that at that time the Philistines ruled over Israel. You remember before we started Samson, the Philistines ruled over them, and they repented and they wanted the Lord, and the Lord said no, and then they got rid of their idols and says, "Okay, we'll accept what you want, Lord." And then the Lord was sad that they were afflicted, and he raised up Samson. That jumps into chapter 13 about Samson. So the Lord was looking for an opportunity against the Philistines. Isn't that interesting? Comments. The Lord had told Israel not to intermarry with the Canaanites. Samson is directly disobeying that command from the Lord. But the Lord was not making an exception here for Samson. He was merely using Samson's waywardness to punish the Philistines. Now, this is interesting. The Lord does not want us to sin. The Lord does not want us to be worldly. But the Lord can use that for his own purposes. The Lord can use people's sin for his purpose. I just said that. Remember Joseph? Remember the story of Joseph and his brothers? It was not right that his brothers took him and threw him in the pit, and then when this Ishmaelite band came by, they hauled him out of the pit and they sold him into slavery to go down into Egypt. That was not a right thing to do. That's not the way you treat your brother. Girls, that's not the way you treat your brother. Don't sell him into slavery. But the Lord used that for good purposes. Cross-reference, Genesis 50, verses 19 and 20. The famine had struck. Joseph's brothers had come down and were looking for food. They didn't have any, even up in Israel. And Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, and they were worried because they had sold him into slavery. Oh no, this is Joseph. How did he ever rise from a slave to be the second highest in Egypt? He's going to get revenge on us people. But Joseph said this to his brothers. But Joseph said to them, do not fear, for I am in the place of God. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Isn't that interesting? Though the brothers sinned, the Lord in his sovereignty, now the Lord don't want us to sin, but the Lord in his sovereignty can use our sin for his purposes. I think that that's kind of an interesting principle in Scripture. Philippians chapter 1, verses 12, 13, and 14. It was not right that Paul got arrested and got put in prison. Paul was serving the Lord, but he got arrested. He spent some time in Rome preaching the gospel while he was in Rome. Notice what he says here. Philippians is one of the prison epistles. Paul wrote it while he was in prison in Rome. He says this, I want you to know, brothers, Philippians, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. Now, it wasn't right that Paul got arrested. It wasn't right that Paul got thrown in prison. Evil men did that to him. The Jews plotted against him. The Romans arrested him. But Paul says here, God was working it out so that the gospel could be spread. The gospel could be advanced. He says, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard. The imperial guard was a special guard. They're called the Praetorian Guard. And while Paul was in Rome, you read the end of the book of Acts, he was able to rent his own house, but he was still under guard. It was the Praetorian Guard that was guarding him as a prisoner. Can you imagine if you were the guard that had to guard Paul, huh? What do you think you would hear every day? You know, you'd hear the gospel. He'd share how Jesus died on the cross, even for Roman Praetorian Guard, Imperial Guard. He says, so that it has become known throughout the whole Imperial Guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. He was sharing the gospel with them, huh? Most of the brothers, having become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. So first of all, Paul is able to share with the Praetorian Guard. It even mentions later in the book of Philippians that the household of Caesar had heard the gospel. That was from Paul. But also a second good thing that came out of this is that others were more bold to preach the gospel because Paul was thrown in prison. So it got others out there preaching the gospel. Well, Paul's in prison. He can't be preaching the gospel. We need to step up and we need to start sharing the gospel with others. So even though Paul being thrown in jail was not a good thing, was not what it was evil men that did that to him, the Lord was using it for good purposes. Whenever a trial or a problem or a difficult time comes in your life, you say, oh, this is horrible. But the Lord is probably using that to accomplish some purpose. All right, listen to this statement. I have prayed this for a number of months now. This is a worldwide virus. It is a pain. It is causing death. It is a horrible thing that has spread throughout the whole earth. God is still in control. God has a purpose for this virus that will bring glory to his kingdom. I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
When I pray about this, I don't pray, Lord, make this virus go away as quick as possible. I'd like to pray that. What I pray is this, Lord, accomplish your purposes through this virus that has hit the whole world. We see that in Samson's life. What he was doing was not right, but the Lord was going to use it to free the Israelites from the captivity of the Philistines. Point number 3, Samson kills the lion, verses 5 through 7. Then Samson went down with his father and mother to Timnah, brought his parents along to get the deal taken care of, and they came to the vineyard of Timnah. And behold, a young lion came toward him roaring. Now, by young lion, I don't think it was talking about a cute little baby lion. It was probably a pretty good-sized lion yet in his prime and came toward him roaring. Then the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and although he had nothing in his hand, he tore the lion in pieces as one tears a young goat. I remember the last time that I was tearing a young goat. I would take that thing and just rip it. No, I like the illustration they use here. Like everyone tears goats apart. You know how that goes. And he tore the lion apart, just like that. But he did not tell his father and his mother what he had done. Verse 7. Then he went down and talked with the woman, and she was right in the eyes of Samson. Something I want to point out here. Whenever you see pictures of Samson, you see a Dwayne Johnson, The Rock type of a guy, right? You know? But you know, we have no indication that his body was like that, because the supernatural strength that came on him was from the Spirit of the Lord. He could have been a weak 90-pound guy, and this lion comes after him, and all of a sudden the Spirit of the Lord causes him to be able to do these great things. We don't know that he was a weightlifter, bodybuilding type of a guy. I'm going to comment on verse 7 here. Comments. Even though Samson did not have a godly character, he still had special supernatural powers from the Lord. Isn't it reassuring to you that the Lord doesn't need a perfect person to be able to use for his kingdom? Sometimes our lives, I know sometimes my life reflects the character of Samson quite a bit, more so than I want it to, you know? The Lord doesn't need a perfect person to use for his kingdom. This shows the grace of God. Here we see he kills a lion with his bare hands. Notice verse 7. You remember what the whole theme of the book of Judges was? The very last verse, when we get to the end, the very last verse says, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Here we see an example of that. This Philistine whom he wasn't supposed to marry, she was probably a pretty good-looking gal. She was right in Samson's eyes. Samson wasn't looking at it in a spiritual way. How is this lady going to help me in my spiritual walk with the Lord? No, that isn't what he was considering at all. She was right in the eyes of Samson. This goes along with the theme of the book. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Cross-reference, Deuteronomy 7, verses 1 through 4. You remember the book of Deuteronomy. Moses, they've come to the edge of the promised land. Moses isn't going to go in the promised land. Joshua is going to take over, bring them into the land. The book of Deuteronomy is basically a few sermons that Moses preached in departing from the Israelites, giving them warning, giving them his final advice before he left them. He says this, when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it, and clears away many nations before you, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, 7 nations more numerous and mighty than you. And when the Lord your God gives them over to you and you defeat them, then you must devote them to complete destruction. You shall not make no covenant with them and show no mercy to them. You shall not intermarry with them, Samson. You shall not intermarry with them, giving your daughters to their sons or taking their daughters for your sons. The Lord had commanded this of them. Don't intermarry with the Philistines because they're going to, verse 4, for they would turn away your sons from following me to serve other gods. So the Lord warned them. Samson was directly disobeying what the Lord had commanded them not to do. Samson proposes, let me say it right. Samson proposes a riddle, verses 8 through 14. After some days, he returned to take her, and he turned aside to see the carcass of the lion. Previously, he had killed this. And behold, there was a swarm of bees in the body of the lion and honey. He scraped it out into his hands and went on, eating as he went. So he had a wonderful meal as he traveled of honey. Nice treat. Kind of like stopping and buying a Hershey bar at the gas station and continuing on. He had his honey as he went. As soon as the people saw him, they brought 30 companions to be with him. Now, most Bible scholars believe that this was kind of like a wedding party, maybe his groomsmen in the wedding. They brought 30 companions to be with him. And Samson said to them, let me now put a riddle to you. If you can tell me what it is within the 7 days of the feast, so they were going to feast for 7 days as part of the wedding ceremony, and find it out, then I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you cannot tell me what it is, then you shall give me 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. And he said to them, here's his riddle. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Now, we know the story, but isn't this a kind of a clever riddle that Samson comes with? Out of the eater, the lion, came something to eat, the honey that he found in that carcass. Out of the strong came something sweet, the honey. So that's his riddle to them. They didn't have the background story. They didn't know that Samson had killed this lion along the way. Samson found honey in the dead lion that he had killed in the last trip, and he ate from it, and then he came to his wife. But the Philistines came to accompany him. He proposed a riddle to them. This is that riddle, I just read it. Out of the eater came something to eat. Out of the strong came something sweet. Riddles in the Bible. This got me thinking about, where Samson posed a riddle, and you hear about riddles in the Bible. Here, this is taken from gotquestions.org. Riddles were a type of word puzzle widely used in ancient times, both for entertainment and as a test of wisdom. We kind of use riddles for that today, huh? Riddles allowed the speaker to obscure valuable information from the undeserving while simultaneously disclosing a vital truth to worthy listeners. Jesus' parables were along this line. There were those who didn't understand the parables, but Jesus gave the interpretation to his disciples. Typically, the language of a riddle functioned on 2 levels. It conveyed a straightforward meaning and a symbolic or allegorical point that was understood only by discerning individuals. You had to have wisdom in order to understand these riddles. Likely the best known riddle in the Bible is the one that Samson told at his wedding feast. I'm still quoting from that website. They talk about the riddle that Samson posed. Samson's riddle was the amusement type often used at weddings, banquets, feasts, and intellectual gatherings of the ancient world. So it was something they did regularly. They're celebrating, and somebody says, "Let me throw a riddle at you, see if any of you can figure it out." The groom, Samson, entertained and challenged his 30 male Philistine guests by asking them to solve a riddle within 7 days. The prize Samson offered was 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothing to the deserving guest. Either the one who guessed it or they would give it to Samson if they couldn't guess the riddle. If no one solved the riddle, the guests would have to give Samson an identical prize. All right, so other riddles in the Bible. Where do we find any other ones? This is interesting. The same word, though it is not usually translated as riddle, the same word that's used for Samson's riddle in the Hebrew, higdah, is translated as hard questions. You remember the story of when Solomon was ruling and the Queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon, and she had all kinds of difficult questions that she threw at him, and he answered them, so much so that she was just amazed at the wisdom. Well, what's translated there as hard questions is the same word that's used of riddle here. So Samson was showing his wisdom by being able to answer those questions from the Queen of Sheba. Here I have it. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. That's the same word as riddles in our text. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. I thought that was kind of an interesting cross-reference, that she posed riddles, hard questions to Solomon, but the Lord had given Solomon such wisdom that he was able to answer them for her. By the way, it is commonly thought that the Queen of Sheba became one of Solomon's wives. That's not in the Bible. Queen of Sheba probably didn't marry Solomon. She went, later on it says she went back home and she was amazed by Solomon's wisdom, but it never talks about them getting married. Someone who could solve riddles was considered a wise and discerning person. Okay, riddles. Samson posed a riddle. The Philistines cheat. On the 4th day, so 7 days, 3 days had gone by, they're starting to get worried. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Entice your husband to tell us what the riddle is." Now, they didn't ask her nicely. Listen to what they said. "Lest we burn you and your father's house with fire. Have you invited us here to impoverish us? You know, this is gonna cost us too much to give Samson all of those clothes. You had better get him to tell you, or we're going to burn you and your father and your house." And Samson's wife wept before him. "Oh, dear, you need to give me the answer to this riddle." You know how wives can be. Oh, can I say that? Can I say "Oh, you only hate me. You do not love me. You have put a riddle to my people and you have not told me what it is." So she, with some fake tears, weaseled it out of Samson, Then she told the riddle to her people, and the men of the city said to him, come to Samson and said, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" They had the answer to his riddle. Cheating, threatening death to the wife, and she weaseled it out of Samson. I like the book of Judges. It's It's so honest in all of the stories it's got in here. You know, you can just see human nature carrying out in this book. Samson's wife was threatened and betrayed him. She gave the answer to the Philistines. The reward for the winner was 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. That's going to come in play here in just a minute. So now Samson owed them these items of clothing. The same type of betrayal happened later to Samson with his haircut that he got. By the way, I had a pretty barber cut my hair this week. Don't tell my wife, but I go see this pretty barber regularly. Laurel cuts my hair. So she betrayed him, just like Delilah. Here's a cross-reference. Samson, it seems that he was closer to the Philistines. It doesn't talk about any Israelites that he knew, any buddies, any friends he had among the Israelites. We're going to see his best man was a Philistine at his wedding. Samson was affected by the Philistines. But it says here, the fear of man lays a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is safe. Samson was trusting in this Philistine wife, and she betrayed him. Samson gets revenge. End of verse 18 and 19. And he said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have found out my riddle. Isn't this a wonderful quote from Samson? If you had not plowed with my heifer, and the Spirit of the Lord rushed upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 men of the town, they were Philistines, and took their spoil and gave the garments to those who had told the riddle. In hot anger, he went back to his father's house. So he didn't even stay. The feast maybe wasn't even over yet. It's supposed to be 7 days of feasting, and this was the 4th day, and the wife so maybe it was the 5th, 6th day. He got mad and went home. But where did he get his garments? He went down to a Philistine town, killed 30 Philistines, took all of their clothes from them, and brought them back to these guys to pay them, you know. I can just see them, a whole pile of blood-stained clothes that he brought back to these Philistines because he owed it to them. You know, here's your 30 garments, you know. But they had been taken from some other Philistines. Plowed with my heifer. This is from a site, Biblical Hermeneutics. When Samson refers to his wife as a heifer, is he doing so in a derogatory sense of meaning? That was a question that was posed to some of these people on this site. Samson was indeed describing his wife to be as a reckless, carefree cow who couldn't foresee how her behavior toward her husband to be would spoil the marriage even before it was consummated, which traditionally happened at the end of the 7-day feast. So yeah, they say he was insulting his wife because she had betrayed him. Remember the verse earlier in our text. You got to remember this verse. We're saying, what? Samson, you're an idiot. You're a fool. You're getting yourself in trouble. You're doing rash things. But the Lord was going to use that. His father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord, for he was seeking an opportunity against the Philistines. At that time, the Philistines ruled over Israel. So the Lord was using it. The Lord was working behind the scenes here we're seeing 30 of them. We're going to see 1,000 of them with the jawbone of a donkey, and then we're going to see thousands of them at the end of Samson's life who are destroyed because of Samson. What happened to Samson's wife? Well, this is interesting. Samson got mad because they knew his riddle, killed 30 people, brought the clothes to these 30 guests that were at his wedding feast, and then he went home mad, went back to mom and dad. And Samson's wife was given to his companion, who had been his best man. Isn't that interesting? The dad took the wife and gave her now to the best man. Well, I guess this guy's not going to follow through on the marriage, so he gave him to the best man at the wedding. Interesting that it talks about a best man. We understand that because that is a tradition of ours. We have groomsmen and we have a best man at our wedding. So I began to try to study out, well, what is the tradition of groomsmen and bridesmaids and best man at the weddings in biblical times? Well, I didn't get a good, solid answer for the best man. Here's a couple of things. They originally began as the bride's kidnappers. It is believed that the best man role originated in the 16th century Germanic Goths, which is far later than biblical times, but our tradition of the best man originated back in the 16th century as the groomsmen who kidnapped the bride. So they'd go to some village and they would kidnap this bride. Well, you know that the bride's family is going to get mad and come and try to get her back, and these groomsmen were there to protect the groom. The best man then stood next to the bride during the ceremony to prevent other suitors or family members from taking her and to make sure she didn't run away. Yeah. So groomsmen and bridesmaid. Now, groomsmen. Traditionally, according to the Roman ritual, conferriatio, 10 witnesses were required to be present at a wedding while the couple recited sacred verses. So this is in the Roman culture. 10 witnesses were supposed to be present to validate that they made their sacred vows to each other. They believe that the tradition of groomsmen came out of the 10 witnesses. So these witnesses they all had to be men in the Roman culture. The first bridesmaids appear even before ancient Rome. In the Bible story recounting Jacob's marriage, go back to Genesis, Jacob's marriage, to Leah and Rachel, each wife brought a female servant to the ceremony, and they literally were the bridesmaids. Remember that? They brought these servants, and both Leah and Rachel and Jacob had relations with all four of them. You know, they became a part of the marriage as well. Well, they were the bridesmaids. So that's what I found about groomsmen and bridesmaids and best man. I did not find during the time of the judges what was the custom of the best man, but apparently Samson had a best man. The dad gave the bride to the best man. Comments. By the way, I did find out, even though Samson left before the 7-day ritual ceremony was over, he had already made his vows and they were considered legally married. So what the dad did was not right, you know, so this action will be important in the next chapter, the fact that he gave the bride away to the best man. But notice this guy was Samson's best man. He had a Philistine stand up with him. No Israelites in this story whatsoever. It seems, I say here, Samson seems to have a lot of relations with the Philistines in the land. Nothing with the Israelites. It seems the Philistines influenced his life a lot. And it seems to be certainly to have affected, he seems to certainly be affected by them. We need to be careful not to allow the world to influence our lives. God has saved us out of the world, but he wants us to live in the world. Remember Jesus' prayer in John 17, we call it his high priestly prayer, and he prays to the Father. He says, my disciples are in the world, but they're not of the world. So we are to live among the unsaved people. We work with them. We have them as neighbors. We they are around us all the time, and we are to be a witness for the Lord Jesus Christ to them. But we are not to allow their worldliness to affect our lives and drag us down into the same kind of worldly practices that they do. So it's kind of a cutting edge. We are to be among them, but we're not to allow them to affect us. You talk to Christians who work in maybe a factory where the people around them all the time are using foul language. Well, when you're hearing foul language all the time, it's hard not to pick that up in your own life. You need to be careful about that. But yet, you are to be an influence on the unsaved people around you that you are working with. Samson certainly didn't influence the Philistines towards the Lord. They seem to have influenced him an awful lot into a worldly lifestyle. All right, here's my conclusion. Right on time. I'm getting so good at this. Not all the judges were godly men, especially Samson. Though Samson had a special birth from the Lord, he was a very wayward judge. We're going to see that even more in the next couple chapters, next couple sermons. He wanted a marriage from a Philistine, like a spoiled child. He made his parents fulfill this. But even though this was wrong, verse 4, the Lord used it to punish the Philistines. The Lord is at work behind the scenes. Let's see, there seems to be a very famous verse, Romans chapter 8, verse 28. All things work together for the good. The Lord working behind the scenes. Oh! Let's have prayer as I close my sermon. Father, thank you for this story about Samson. Though we see that he was very wayward, he allowed the Philistines